webinar is packed with scripting goodies. And with me here today is Maura.
Hello, it's good to be working with you all today.
So let me just see, we want our slides up. Is it? Yep. Okay. So let's get started. There we go. So like I said, my name is Mingzi Ho, and I am a technical solutions specialist at Esri I'm so sorry, at Esri Canada in the marketing department. And today I have with me Maura.
Hello, my name is Maura Daffern, and I am Esri Canada's Geo Developer Advocate. And it's, again, nice to be doing this presentation for you guys all today.
So for those who have attended our webinar, welcome back. And you'll know that this webinar will be recorded and everyone attending will get an exit survey. So thank you in advance for filling those out. We ask that you leave your questions till the very end. So in the next slide here, we'll be able to see a preview of where you can put your Q&A. So that's actually nested in the 3 dots usually on the bottom right-hand corner. So going over today's agenda, we'll have Maura cover the GIS module in ArcGIS API for Python using notebooks in both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro. And then the last part, we will take a look at how all those fun scripts can be put together and collect information to power a dashboard that can help you monitor your ArcGIS Online organization. So I'm going to hand things off to Maura.
Thanks, Mingzi. So in the first section right here, we're going to talk about managing users, content, and groups with the ArcGIS API for Python. So when we talk about a WebGIS is hosted within ArcGIS Online or on premises using an instance of ArcGIS Enterprise. And your GIS is a collaborative environment that allows you to create, visualize, and share maps, scenes, apps, layers, analytics, and data. And the ArcGIS API for Python is a powerful, modern, and easy to use Pythonic library that is representative of your WebGIS itself. The API, whoops, oh dear. The API is for administrators and DevOps. So administrators can use the API for configuration, maintenance of various components such as servers and web adapters, and also administering users, content, and groups. DevOps can use the ArcGIS API for Python for engineering, testing, and release and life cycles. Content publishers can also use the ArcGIS API for Python for adding items to the organization and sharing them appropriately. Analysts and data scientists can use the ArcGIS API for Python to process content to produce information products from various different content. And power users and developers can use the ArcGIS API for Python to extend capabilities and build displays. Overall, again, the ArcGIS API for Python is a Pythonic representation of your GIS. The API is distributed as the ArcGIS package via Conda and pip. It is also included in ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Enterprise, and ArcGIS Online. Within the ArcGIS package, which represents the generic GIS module, functionality is organized into a number of different modules that make it simple to use and easy to understand. Each module has a handful of types and functions that are focused towards one aspect of the GIS. The GIS module is the most important and provides the entry point to the GIS. It lets you manage users, groups, and content in the GIS, and GIS admins will find that they spend a lot of time in this particular module. The modules in green are used to access the various spatial capabilities or geographic data sets in the GIS. These modules include a family of analysis functions, types, and other helper objects for working with spatial data of a particular type, including the apps module for accessing and managing web applications built with the GIS. The modules in blue provide additional functionality for your workflows. The geocoding module is for finding places. The geometry module is for representing geometries of feature data and functions for working with them. The geoprocessing module makes it easy to import third-party geoprocessing tools and work with them. The Geo-enrichment module helps you enrich your data sets with thematic information. And the geoanalytics module is used to work with the distributed computing framework essential for big data processing, such as aggregation, regression, detection, and clustering. The modules in orange allow you to visualize and disseminate your GIS data and analysis. The widgets module includes the MapView Jupyter Notebook widget for visualizing maps and layers. And the mapping module has types and functions for working with web maps and web layers. So for the purposes of our presentation today, we will be focusing on the GIS module, which is a representation of your ArcGIS Online organization or ArcGIS Enterprise. And it represents a collaborative environment that allows you to create, visualize, and share maps, scenes, apps, layers, analytics, and data. It provides an information module for your organization and provides an entry point into your GIS. This module provides functionality to manage, create, read, update, and delete GIS users, groups, and content. The main classes of this module are the GIS class, which represents the GIS, either an ArcGIS Online organization or an ArcGIS portal. A user, which obviously represents the GIS user, which has properties such as the username, first name, and last name, as well as the role of the user. Roles themselves are a class within the GIS module, and that has properties such as the name, the description, the privileges, and the role ID. Groups represent groups within the GIS. An item represents an individual piece of content within the GIS. The GIS module also includes resource manager classes or helper objects for managing GIS users, groups, content, and data stores. Each helper has a similar pattern of usage, methods to get, search, and create the respective resources. The recommended programming pattern is not to create GIS resources directly, but to using their constructor, but to access them through corresponding helper objects. As we noted in the previous slide, the GIS class provides access to the organization, the system, the users, and the content. The GIS class supports multiple login methods. You can make use of the Python API as an anonymous user to query and view publicly shared maps and layers. You can also connect using an ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise user, or connect using an ArcGIS Enterprise using an enterprise identity store such as LDAP or Active Directory, or use user authentication with OAuth 2. You can also leverage ArcGIS Pro Authentication. Using the Pro Authentication scheme, scripts can create an instance of the GIS class representing the active portal in ArcGIS Pro without requiring the user to pass in their credentials. If you sign in frequently to a particular GIS, you may wish to leverage profiles to store your credentials locally on your computer. Persistent profiles can be created by giving the GIS authorization credentials and specifying a profile name. The profile stores all of the authorization credentials, except the password, in the user's home directory in an unencrypted config file named ArcGIS profile. The profile also securely stores the password in an OS-specific password manager. Now, we're going to first of all before we talk about notebooks, we're going to talk about Jupyter. Jupyter is an open source software designed to support interactive data science and scientific computing. Now, Jupyter notebooks contain both computer code, for example, Python, and rich text elements such as maps, charts, 3D scenes, equations, figures, links, etc. Jupyter notebooks are intended to create both human readable documents containing the analysis description and the results, as well as executable documents which can be run to perform data analysis. It is a rich IDE experience and is browser-based and lets you write, run, and document your code all in one place. Esri has included Jupyter notebooks alongside ArcGIS Pro for several years now, and the ArcGIS Python API for Python was developed to make the most use of Jupyter's functionality. Jupyter notebooks are embedded in ArcGIS products starting in ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7 and ArcGIS Pro 2.5. They are also integrated into ArcGIS Online. Whatever platform you're using notebooks in, the notebooks are directly integrated into the ArcGIS user interface, so you can create, edit, and save notebooks within the GIS. The notebooks you create in ArcGIS Pro will leverage the ArcGIS Pro Python environment, which you can customize through the Python package manager, the Python command prompt, or through Anaconda. With respect to ArcGIS Enterprise, any notebook that you create using the standard license of Notebook Server bundles the Python API and nearly 300 other third-party Python libraries built in, whereas the advanced license for ArcGIS Notebook Server includes everything in standard, but also ArcPy. Similarly, within ArcGIS Online, the standard offering includes over 300 open source Python libraries, plus the ArcGIS API for Python, while the advanced offering includes standard plus ArcPy. Whatever platform you are using notebooks on, the API includes a map widget which can be used to visualize the content of your GIS and see the results of your analysis. In ArcGIS Pro 2.5, you can create, edit, and save Jupyter Notebooks as part of your Pro project with ArcGIS Notebooks. You have the option to create a notebook as part of the ArcGIS Pro project and edit the notebook using the Jupyter interface that now comes with all editions of ArcGIS Pro. Notebooks that you create in ArcGIS Pro will leverage the ArcGIS Pro Python environment. So with notebooks in ArcGIS Pro, you can store your notebooks right in ArcGIS Pro rather than a separate Jupyter environment. Perform analysis and immediately view the results in a geographic context using the map widget. Interact with the emerging data, document and automate your workflows, and extend the notebooks using open source libraries using the Python package manager. In ArcGIS Online, you're provided with a web-based interface for notebooks that's integrated with the ArcGIS Online platform to create, share, and run data management, administrative, and data science scripts. Authors can use the ArcGIS API for Python and ArcPy, and over 300 popular open source analytical, statistical, and machine learning libraries. And you can incorporate maps and geospatial data into your notebooks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to my first demonstration. And in my first demonstration, I'm working with a notebook in ArcGIS Pro. And in this notebook, I'm going to take you through the process of creating and managing content, creating and managing users, and creating and managing groups. So to get started, the very first thing that you have to do is import the GIS module from arcgis.gis. Now, you can log in as an anonymous user, which would give you the ability to interact with any publicly available content in ArcGIS Online. Of course, for our purposes, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be interacting with content in my ArcGIS Online account, which is this Esri CA UC3 ArcGIS Online organizational account. So I'm going to log in with that username for this particular environment. After I've done that, I can get a reference to the gis.users object, which is the user manager within the GIS, and then get information about my currently logged in user. In this case, the user is me. We can also log in using ArcGIS Pro Authentication. Now, when you log in using ArcGIS Pro Authentication, that takes your currently logged in user that you're logged in with Pro and logs you into the GIS using that username into that particular portal. So you can see that in this case, once I've logged into the GIS, I can query the GIS for properties such as whether or not it is an ArcGIS Enterprise portal. In this case, it's not, it's an ArcGIS Online organization, as well as what the URL of the GIS is. So those are just a couple of examples of how you can log into ArcGIS Online using the ArcGIS API for Python. There are other ways that you can log in, such as Active Directory, PKI, and more. And all the information about logging into using different authentication schemes is available in developers.arcgis.com. Now, when working with the ArcGIS Online when working with the ArcGIS API for Python, one thing that you might want to consider doing is setting up profiles for those user accounts that you log into ArcGIS Online with frequently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a profile called ArcGIS Online Profile Demo. And then when I connect with the GIS, I don't have to specify a username and password to connect to the GIS. From that point forward, I just need to simply specify what the profile name is to connect using that profile. Now, again, this profile is stored in a file in your Windows in a file in your Windows profile called .arcgis profile. This contains information such as what the URL of the portal is that you're connecting to and the username. And the password is stored in your Windows Password Manager, which I had open. Just open that again. So that's stored in Windows Credential Manager. So you can see that I have this particular profile that I set up, and the credentials are stored within this particular profile within Windows Credential Manager. And again, once I've connected using that profile, I can get information about my currently logged in user. So let's talk about the GIS object now. The GIS object has a set of properties that's returned to you when you call gis.properties as a dictionary. You can get information about individual properties, such as available credits and the current version of the ArcGIS API that you're working with. It's possible to update the properties of the GIS by calling gis.updateProperties. So for example, I could change the name of my ArcGIS Online organization by calling gis.updateProperties and specifying a new name. And you can see that that name is set to be the name of my GIS from that point forward. So I'm just going to set it back to what it originally was to maintain this organization as it should be. So we're going to talk about maps now within Jupyter Notebooks. So what I can do to create a map widget is just simply set a map object equal to the result of gis.map, and we're going to zoom into the city of Toronto, Canada. For the map itself, we're going to specify the base map to be the dark gray vector map. I can then get content such as bike shops within the city of Toronto and add it to my map. You can see that it's then interactively added to my map within my notebook itself. So let's look at working with content now. Now with the API, there's a couple of different ways that you can get information about the API and how it works. One of the useful features of Jupyter Notebooks is that when you type in a particular method on an object such as the GIS Content Manager, you can see that we can apply a question mark after the method and run that. And we're given back information about that particular method, such as what its signature is and what the doc string is. There's other ways that we can get information about how the GIS works, and that's the ArcGIS API for Python developer help. So you can see here that we have the GIS, and when we ask for the content manager, you can see that if we have the content manager, it has various different methods associated with it, such as advanced search, analyze, and also search as well. So if we wanted to search for content in our GIS, in this case right here, what we're doing is we're searching for content and passing in a wildcard character as the query string. And as you can see, if we look at the help right here, and see that the query syntax is a required string to make this search work. So in this example right here, I'm passing in the wildcard character star for the query string, looking for a maximum of 100 items, and then get the number of items that are returned by my search. Now that's 100 items and it's not very specific. So what I might want to do is I might want to search for bicycle data within my organization. You can see that I get back 5 items from that content search. You can also limit searches inside and outside the organization. So you saw in my previous example, I set the outside organization value equal to false to only search within my ArcGIS Online organization. If I set that to true and search for bicycle, you can see that I get a much greater number of results back. We can also limit the searches by item type. So you can see here, I'm searching in my GIS, within my GIS itself, not outside the organization, for all those items where the feature type is feature layer and contain the word bicycle. you can see that 2 items are returned. And those are these items right here within my ArcGIS Online organization, these 2 feature layers themselves. Now, looking at a simple admin task, how can we find out how many public items were created and shared publicly yesterday on ArcGIS Online? So to do that, we're going to get 2 date stamps for today and yesterday and do an advanced search on the content manager to find all those items within ArcGIS Online that were created between yesterday and today. You can see that between those 2 date stamps, 8,267 items were created. So let's look at adding, deleting, and publishing content. So you can see that when I look at GIS.content, what I actually get back is the content manager, which gives us the ability to add and manage our GIS content within our ArcGIS Online organization. Now, if I wanted to figure out how to add content, again, what I could do is I could go to my help documentation, look at the content manager itself. You can see that it has an add method. We can get information about the add method and how it works. And we can see that it has 1 required property, and that is the item properties, which is a JSON string which defines the properties of the item that we're adding to ArcGIS Online. Then it has a number of other optional parameters, such as the data that we're adding, the thumbnail, any metadata, who the owner is, which defaults to the currently logged in user, what folder this information will be stored in, etc. So in this case right here, I'm going to be adding some data to my ArcGIS Online organization for bicycle parking racks. So I'm going to say add, I'm going to give it some tags such as cycling, bicycling, and Toronto. Give it a type, which is shapefile, and a title, which is Toronto bike racks locations. And that item is now added to ArcGIS Online. So when I go to my ArcGIS Online user account, you can see that Toronto bike rack locations has now been added as a shapefile to my ArcGIS Online or to my ArcGIS Online profile. Now, it has a generic icon to start with. So what I might want to do is I might want to update the icon with a thumbnail. So you can see that I can call item.update to update the item to use a thumbnail that's stored in on my D drive. So now we've updated that particular item to have a thumbnail associated with it. Now, because this is just a shapefile, it doesn't provide us very much functionality within the ArcGIS Online within our ArcGIS Online environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish it. Now, if we look at the item publish, the item publish help, you can see that what it does is it publishes a hosted service based on an existing source item, such as a shapefile. So we can use item.publish to create feature layers, tiled map, vector tiles, and scene services. So I'm going to call item.publish on that particular item that I created. And this will take a minute to publish the item in ArcGIS Online as a hosted feature service. And after I've done that, I'm going to create a map and add it to the map. So we now have a hosted feature service in our ArcGIS Online organization for Toronto bike rack locations. So I'm going to add it to my map within my ArcGIS notebook environment. Now, what I might want to do is I might want to delete, protect this particular item. And this is important because as I found out yesterday, I accidentally deleted some of the content that I used for this presentation, so I had to load it up again. So delete protecting is important so you don't run into the same problem that I did yesterday. So what I can do is for an individual item, I can set the protect property to be enable equal to true. And then when I try to delete that particular item, I get an error back indicating that that particular function is not allowed. Unable to delete the item because delete protection is turned on. If I turn it off again, I can then go ahead and delete that item. We can also check an item's sharing status. So the shapefile item, its sharing status is currently set to private. And if I wanted to, I could set it to share with everybody and then check to see who that particular item is shared with. So you can see the item is shared with everybody. and the organization, but it's not shared with any groups. Now, another useful task that we might want to do when working with items is cloning content between organizations. So I have 2 user accounts that I'm using for this presentation. I have a user account in Esri UC3, this guy right here. And I have another user account in this other very similarly named organization, Esri Canada UC. And what I want to do is I want to copy content from my Esri UC3 organization to the Esri UC organization. So I'm going to specify as a source my GIS, my Esri UC3 GIS account by specifying a profile. I'm going to select my items to copy. All those items that are returned from the search for bicycle that are of type feature layer. And you can see that I have 2 items, Toronto Bike Shops and Toronto Bike Ways, which is the biking lanes in the city of Toronto. And I can then set my destination using a profile to log into that particular GIS and clone the items using the clone items method on the GIS content manager to clone the items from my Esri UC3 environment to my Esri UC environment. And we'll just give that a minute to run. And again, if we look at the clone, environment, if we look at clone functions, you can see that you can get information about how this particular method works. So we're going to clone content to the GIS by creating new items. Still running. See if that's landed in my destination organization yet. Okay, there they are. Okay, so those items have now been cloned. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at users and look at how you can create and manage users within the GIS. So we can get simple user reports such as the user accounts by user type. So you can see that within my Esri UC3 account, we have three different user types that have users created in them: advanced user type, the creator user type, and the GIS professional user type. We can also get a count of these users by the roles that they have associated with them. So you can see that we have five admins in this organization and 2 publishers. And again, we can also get a count of the number of users within our organization. And this is a very small organization. It only has 7 users. So what I might want to do as an administrator is I might want to create a new user account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on gis.users, I'm going to call the create method. So again, if I wanted to see how that worked, I could go to the GIS user manager and look at the create method, which you can see we have to specify a number of required strings, such as a username, a password, a first name, a last name, and an email. So I'm going to provide this information, first of all, as a skeleton user that I'm going to update a little bit later on in my presentation. So I'm going to, first of all, create that user. It's a temp user within my environment. So if I go back to my environment now and look at members. Oh, wait, that's the wrong organization. Let me just make sure I'm working in the right one. You can see that this temp user has now been created and is present in my organization right here. So because this user is a skeleton user, I might want to change some properties for this user. So first of all, the first thing I want to do is I want the user to not be prompted for a security question and not be prompted to change the password when they log into their environment. So I'm going to call user.reset to set the security question and to reset the password. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update this user so they have a more meaningful first name, last name, and a thumbnail associated with them to display on their user profile. So now we've updated the skeleton user to be Michael Scott, and there's his profile picture. What I might want to do then is I might want to change the role of this user. So for example, I could change this particular user to use the GIS professional user type and update its role to be a data editor. So I'm going to call user.update user license and user.update role to update that particular user. And I'm just going to change the user back to, oh, there's a question. The question I believe was if this notebook is going to be provided after the fact, and the answer to that is yes. We will be providing these notebooks for you to use. And I think Mingxi's going to go through that a little bit later in her presentation. So I'm just going to update my user role to be a publisher. And the reason being is I want that particular user to publish content to our ArcGIS Online environment. So again, I'm going to create a shapefile or use a shapefile of office locations that I'm going to upload to this user's profile. I'm going to set the item properties, and then I'm going to call the content manager add and add this shapefile data. And I'm going to specify in the add method the owner of that particular item that I'm adding to be this currently logged in user. So we now have an item within our ArcGIS Online organization that represents offices, which I'm then going to publish again as a hosted feature service within our ArcGIS Online organization. We can also search for users. So you can see that I named this user I named this user starting with the word DEL underscore. So I can search for users using a wildcard search, as you can see right here. And that returns to me that particular user that I'm working with. I might want to look for that user's items. You can see that this user owns 2 items, a shapefile that we just uploaded and the hosted feature service of office locations. And we can get information about that user's items by printing them out to our notebook environment. Now, because this is a temporary user that I just created for this presentation, what I might want to do is, and this is a pretty common administrative task, I might want to take their content and reassign it to somebody else if we're offboarding the Michael Scott user, for example, which we're going to do in a minute. So what I'm going to do is for each item in that user's profile, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the item.reassign to reassign that content to my currently logged in user. And that content is now reassigned to me. And for some reason, I always get an error when I do this, which I have yet to figure out. But you can see that if I look at my content in the correct organization, these office locations layers have now been reassigned to me. Now we can go ahead and manage users. We want to offboard that Michael Scott user now. So what I can do is I can then go and remove any license entitlements that particular user has and delete the user from our ArcGIS Online organization by calling user.delete. And after we do a search for users using that wildcard, we should see that no users come back with that particular username. So the next thing I'm going to look at briefly is working with groups. So again, if we ask for gis.groups, that gives us back the ArcGIS Group Manager class. We can search for groups within our ArcGIS Online organization, and you can see that within my organization, I have one group for Toronto content. So this particular group has been returned to me when I search for gis.groups. Then I might want to create a group for my office location information that I just uploaded to ArcGIS Online. So what I'm going to call on the group manager itself is I'm going to call the create method to create an office locations group within my organization. We're going to give it some tags, whether or not it's invitation only, and whether or not auto join is set to true or false. And now we have an office locations group which we can assign content to. Again, we might want to update the group by calling group.update to update the group with the thumbnail. We can then assign items to the group by searching for items within my profile that match the word title, and then share this content to the group. And add any users to the particular group that we're working with. So that's just a brief overview of using notebooks in ArcGIS Pro and also managing content within the ArcGIS environment. I'm just going to show you a brief demonstration, which has to be really brief because we're running out of time, of using notebooks in the ArcGIS Online environment. So if we look at some commonly used tasks, what I might want to do as an administrator is identify stagnant or unused users within my organization. And that's important because you might want to free up any licenses that you have available within your ArcGIS Online organization if you have users who aren't actually using it. So this is notebooks within the ArcGIS Online environment, and you can see that it looks very similar to notebooks within the ArcGIS Pro environment. What I'm going to do, first of all, is point out that using ArcGIS Online, the authentication method that you can use is to specify the keyword home when you're connecting to when you're creating the GIS object itself. And so I'm going to connect to my GIS. And the first message that we get is that we're logged in as an administrative user and we should proceed with caution. We're going to collect the users, we're going to collect the organization's users. And then we're going to go through the users in the organization, find those users where the last login is greater than 0, and that will be users to contact to see if they will want to use the ArcGIS Online organization still. And find also those users where the last login is greater than or is less than or equal to 0, which would be users that have never logged into the ArcGIS Online organization. So you can see now we have a list of users to contact who haven't used ArcGIS Online in a number of days, and also a user who has never logged into the ArcGIS Online organization. So we might want to think about contacting those users to see if they still want to use the ArcGIS Online organization. And I'm just going to look at one other, I've got a number of different examples which we'll make available to you shortly, but I'm just going to look at one other example before I pass things over to Mingzi. Oops. And that is looking at the top 10 storage users. So this is useful because you may wish to understand who is using the most space within your ArcGIS Online organization. And you may want to contact them to see if because of course using storage space within ArcGIS Online consumes credits. So you may want to contact them to see if they can reduce the amount of content that they currently have within their ArcGIS Online organization. So you can see that, again, we're setting our GIS object is equal to the result of GIS home to get a reference to the ArcGIS Online environment. We're going to get a reference to the users within our ArcGIS Online environment itself and report that we have 24 users. And you can see that if we look at the usage list, we can get a total count of the amount of storage that's being used. And then we can get a list of the users who are currently using the most space within the ArcGIS Online environment. So we might want to contact them to see if they still need to use that amount of storage within the ArcGIS Online environment. And that's it for my presentation. So we'll just pass things back over to Mingzi.
So let me share my screen here. That was a lot of goodies. So where can we find that? A lot of people were asking. Well, actually, for this presentation, we made the scripts available through this story map here. So let me just pop this into the chat to all attendees here. so you can have access to it. So if you scroll down, we just have like a simple objective and then managing user content through API for Python, and that will lead you to these scripts. So let me just make that here. So here is where you'll find all the script that Maura mentioned in her demo. So for my segment, I am going to show you how you can take all the scripts that we've been, looking through with Maura, and how we can use those scripts, take segments of it, and create a dashboard to look at the overall situation of our ArcGIS Online organization. So what I'm here to show you is how you can use the ArcGIS API for Python in ArcGIS Notebooks to retrieve data about your organization. And then I'll go over the structure of how you can fill out these kind of hosted tables that will be supporting your ArcGIS dashboard. Now, this is based on a wonderful blog post by Calvin Kwong and Bonnie Stayer, and the link is also made available in the story map here. So what are the potential use cases for a dashboard like this? Now, for those who know Dashboard, you'll know that Dashboard is a great interface. It's a great platform for you to interact with your data. And for those who are familiar, you'll also know that there are filters and indicators that can instantly tell you the information you need to see. But why would I need a dashboard like that for my organization? Well, you can monitor who is using a lot of credits, where they're using it, whether it's storage or analysis. You can also make sure that everyone's ArcGIS Online items, our detailed metadata, are filled out. Now, for those who are like me, who spends maybe couple weeks finding out which unused item is in my organization, this is the perfect tool to identify those items quickly and delete them because they're unused. So let me show you that. This is the dashboard that we're speaking of. So this is just a sample dashboard of sample data set that's going on in an organization. I am actually going to show you the one that is data that's powered by the marketing organization at Esri Canada. So you can see these are the item counts. I have 6,000 credits remaining. And majority of users using this account is myself. So you can see my credit consumption and then also the overall organization generated items depending on like the viewers and the share settings. So that is also available in these charts here. You also have storage indicator telling you how much is being used up for storage and feature service. Now, if I go through and cycle through the tabs here, you will see the different trends lines of my credit consumption, or overall, sorry, organization consumption of credits, the feature service storage, the users, how they're spending the credits. So if I had more users here that are using credits, you'll see more lines here appearing. And then finally, these two tabs are the items and the user profile. Now this will make more sense as I get into this component here, which is the item list. Now the item list, it just shows you the type of item that you have in your organization, and they're color coded based on the item type. So this here is a survey 123 item, all the food I have eaten. So I actually keep track of restaurants I go to using a survey 123 form. So you'll see this is the form, and the item detail is exactly what you would see when you open your ArcGIS Online account, because this is just a simple web embed. Now, if I go to my profile or the user profile, you'll see it is myself. Now, if I cycle through this item list, I also have a feature service list where I can quickly select a feature service and have those information pop up on the side. Now, let me go back to my item list here. The next set of component I want to talk about are the filters. Now, the filters is what makes it powerful. Let me just unselect this item here. I can choose by item type. So if I want to see all the CSV, I'll have it appear in the item list. I will look at different users. So myself, maybe take a look at what Joy is building, take a look. I can also find out or make apparent all the public facing applications or feature service by selecting that in the filter. There's keyword search, storage size, storage size, which is kind of like finding out which item might be taking up too much space in your organization. And then we also have last modified, which is handy if there's certain applications before, let's say 2020 that I don't need, like a year ago, it'll filter it out and I can go through the list and determine which item I can remove. Now let me just reset that. Now the rest of the other filters are views, rating, and number of comments. Now if I go back to the items page and just select a random item here, these information are all based on the item page. So 0 comments, there's not a rating for this item, but if there were, it would come from these information here. There's also the completeness score, which is reflective of the item information of that item. So that is kind of the overall dashboard that displays the information. Now, you guys are all probably wondering, oh my goodness, how do I build this? Well, the workflow is quite simple. You have a hosted notebook that kind of powers and writes and populate information to 3 hosted tables that supports the dashboard in the back end. So if I go back into here, let's take a look at the notebook. So in the story map here, I actually have a link to the sample notebook. And what you'll have to do is download this notebook and re-upload this to your ArcGIS Online account. Now, when you re-upload it, you got to make sure that the notebook runtime is set to ArcGIS Notebook Python 3 Standard 4.0. So once you have that hosted, another thing you need to make sure is that you are an administrator of your organization. So this is a setup that an administrator can do on their end. So the next thing we do after all the notebooks are the tables. So how do I add a table? Well, you simply copy a URL of the table, which is provided in the story map, paste it as a new item, and then you can save this as a hosted tables. Now these hosted table would be empty once you bring it in from the URL provided in the story map here. Once that is created, so as you can see, I actually have my 3. So once you have these tables created, you need to let your script know these tables existed in your organization. So this is the notebook that we were talking about and uploading onto. As you can see, there's a lot in it, but the only thing you'll actually have to get this notebook working is changing the ID. So if I match my table item to my item hosted table, I can just simply copy the ID, go back into my script, match that with the item table ID here, do that for the 2 other hosted table, hit run, and you'll have an amazing, sorry, there's a bar here. You'll have an amazing table populated with information like users, how many credits are they using. You also have feature layer information. So these are all kind of the items that you create per users. So you have the users, the URL, the size. So these are all the information that is powering your dashboard. Now, to the dashboard part, how do we get a copy of this? Well, for those who are new to dashboard, to create any copy of a dashboard, you simply just need to go to a sample dashboard URL. So this is the sample dashboard I was talking about. And then between dashboard / and then a bunch of numbers and characters, which is the actual dashboard ID, type in new. And then what you want to do is new $, ID equals, and then simply hit enter after you fill out this character here. And then you also need to make sure that you're signed into your account. So I am already signed into my organization. and it'll pop up a window saying you'll be creating this new dashboard. Where would you like to save it? Would you like to change the name? I'll just keep it as is. I'm going to hit create dashboard. Now, once we create this dashboard, there are several ways to configure it. You can do it the easy way, the easy and fast way, but using ArcGIS Assistant. But if you somehow make a mistake, it could permanently break your dashboard. So that's something to keep in mind. So I left a bit of hints here where you can copy the ID. So basically in your ArcGIS Assistant, once I am signed in, let me do that really quickly. I find my item, so that's the sample dashboard. Click on it, select the JSON, and now you'll have a JSON of the description and data. So descriptions are kind of your item details, and your data is where you want to go in and start editing. So remember how I said I left some tips here. So simply find the item detail ID. So I'm going to copy this, go to my assistant, do a control find, or somehow whatever the shortcut on your computer is for find. I use a window, so that's why I know that one. Do a find and replace it with the item ID of your hosted table. Hit paste, replace all, and do that one more time for another data source, which is your feature layers. So I'm going to find, there's 5 of those. Let me go to that table, copy the ID, go back to my assistant and replace all, hit save. And technically, my dashboard will not break and the information will be what I had before. So let me go really quickly to my content, find that dashboard on my content here, and let's view this dashboard to see if my marketing data is transferred. So it did, because like I said before, I had 6,000 credits. I had 1,000 or so items. So that was a very quick way to configure your dashboard using ArcGIS Assistant. Now there's more information on changing data source through a post that I have shared on the story map. Another way to configure your dashboard is to do it manually. Now you can do this manually, but it'll take a long time. However, the benefits to it is that you'll understand your data set better, and you can also configure the tools that doesn't have to look like this. So you simply have to go in, configure, change the data source, and update the filters. Once you do that for all the different components in your dashboard, you can go to actions and just add a bit of actions to identify how each of these components are communicating with each other. So filters with a graph and etc. So that is how you would configure the dashboard manually. So I already went through those helpful tips, and we are nearing the end of our presentation. So I'm going to quickly go through scheduling, because we have all these notebooks. They're updating the information on the dashboard. It's great, but how do I keep it up to date? So going back into my notebook here, I can go to task, and the scheduling task feature has been added this year. I was actually very excited because I love to automate my tasks. So simply go to create task. Let me just say automate, hit next. So let me just go back. I don't have keys or values, but you can do that as an option, but I don't need that in my script. I'm gonna hit next and begin on now. I want to update maybe daily, never for ending on. So I'm going to hit create task. So this is going to be a schedule that's going to keep going until I say so. So I already have one set that's been constantly updating daily. So you'll see the details of how successful or failure. I actually had a couple of failed script runs. So that's a good idea to know. And you can view the results, have more in-depth if you run into a problem. You can also edit it. So maybe I don't want updating daily. I want it updating hourly. I can do that as well and make that change, or delete a scheduled task. So let me just delete the one I just create. I don't want duplicates, but that's essentially how you keep the dashboard working and updating as people are using, or administrators are using this dashboard. So that was a very quick intro on how you can use that API for Python as a starting block and create scripts that are populating these hosted tables and then powering your dashboard. So I hope you find that useful and make good use of it. So coming to an end here, I'm going to share a slide here. And if you have any questions, make sure you're entering that in the Q&A. I'll quickly kind of go through the highlights of what we went over today. We learned how to use Notebook in ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online, and we learned how to use the GIS module from Maura. And then through these notebooks, we use the ArcGIS API for Python to manage content, users, and groups. And then we finally utilize a script that populated these hosted table and then build an ArcGIS dashboard to have a creative tool to manage content and monitor your ArcGIS Online organizations.
Mingzi, we can't see your slides.
Oh, you can't see my slides.
Nope.
That is a problem. What are you seeing?
I can see your web browser window.
Ah, hold on. I think
you shared with the app instead of the screen.
Yeah,
there we go.
Do you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. Wow, I did not know I was performing in an app. So now you'll see it, right? These were the summary. Thank you, Maura. That would have been weird if we just kept going. But yes, so we learned how to use Notebook in Pro and ArcGIS Online, and then using ArcGIS API for Python to manage content and users and groups. And now remember, all that script that Maura went through is in the story map. So make sure you bookmark that story map and have that with you. Then
sorry to interrupt, there's a few other scripts, there's a few other notebooks in there as well, which I didn't get a chance to go through, which I think will be useful to people.
Right, there's actually, it was jam-packed, I remember. There was a lot of notebooks here. So make sure you check that out. It all relates to managing your ArcGIS Online organization and items there. And then to finish things off, Maura, did you want to answer any questions really quickly? We have a couple minutes.
Sure. So I think one of the questions that I think you got, Mingzi, was, does cloning a data set from one ArcGIS Online organization to another require partnered collaboration? And the answer to that is no. The organizations that I was using to do that are not partnered, so you do not need to use that. And there's another question. Can we use a pro login in Notebook and get access to all the layers in the map? For example, turn off layers programmatically. Now, if I'm understanding this correctly, I think you're talking about, I could be wrong, but I think you're talking about the layers in your map in ArcGIS Pro. And the answer to that is you would actually, instead of using the ArcGIS API for Python to do that, you would use ArcPy. I'm just gonna, can I share my screen, Mingzi? Can you just pass presenter to me real quick? Thank you.
Here you go.
So what you would use instead is this arcpy.mp, which is another Python module that's part of ArcPy, which allows you to work with layers and maps. You can see that within that particular module, there is a layer class, which allows you to manipulate layers and change their properties, such as their visibility, for example. I don't know if there were any other questions. I think that might be it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of questions on accessing the story map and the slides. So the slides will be sent to you after this presentation, along with the recordings of this webinar. And inside the slide, actually, there's several slides that mentions the story map and links you to it. So don't worry, the information are there. So we are going to actually leave you off with some resources. Make sure, so that the story map for this presentation resource is in there, but make sure you take a look at the ArcGIS API for Python guide and API reference. I believe Maura mentioned that in her demo. It's very helpful to use and refer to. And then finally, thank you for attending the webinar. And if you have any additional questions in the Q&A, feel free to keep dropping it in, and we'll make sure to contact you with the answers. So if we go into the next slide here, that's the resources, upcoming webinars, and training courses. And then this is the slide I want to leave things off with. We have our email address there if you have